Thank you everyone for joining us today in our third part of a series focused on Arc-enabled infrastructure. The very first one last Friday was setting the foundation. Then we went last Tuesday into more of the monitoring and update management side of things. And today we're going to focus on this securing part of the Arc-enabled infrastructure benefits that come with Arc-enabling your infrastructure. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Hoyland and Adam Turner to dive deeper into today. And then one other session that we have coming up next week is diving deep into security. So I'll put the link in the Q&A section so you all have access to that, just to make sure that you're aware of it and can attend and register for that as well. So again, that is focused on SQL next Tuesday. And then also, if you have any questions throughout the session, please post it into the Q&A. And we've got a number of folks watching and monitoring it and can respond to those real time. And then we'll also have some time at the end as well dedicated to Q&A. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mark and Adam. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. So I'm Mark Hoyland. I'm an Azure Technology Specialist focused on Azure infrastructure at Microsoft here. And for those of you that joined the previous sessions, good to see you again. Adam, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. And I am Adam Turner. I'm also a technical specialist within Microsoft inside of Azure West Midwest. Welcome.
Great. Yeah, so maybe just to kick us off here, just to revisit a little bit what we've covered in the first two sessions. In the first session, we covered Arc enablement for servers sitting outside of Azure. And we also talked a lot about Windows Server 2012 and 2012 R2 and the end of support date that's coming up on October 10th. And so we focused on the options that you have to keep your environment secure, in light of that end of support status. But the ideal option, in our opinion, is to modernize your applications by moving them to an Azure platform service and take advantage of eliminating the need for managing your own infrastructure, with services like Azure App Services or PaaS database solutions. You can let us manage that infrastructure and all of the updates on it for you, so you can focus on your applications instead. That second option is to migrate your servers to Azure, which is also we have programs to help you with that if that's something that's of interest for you. And this would give you free extended security updates at zero cost for the next 3 years, or ideally sooner if you continue to move towards upgrading or modernizing your workloads on those 2012 servers. And then the last option that we spoke a lot about is the new feature we're enabling those ESUs with Azure Arc. So for those scenarios where you have servers that just haven't had time to upgrade, or where you have on-premises dependencies that require you to stay where they are, you can enable those ESUs easily with Arc for your 2012 and 2012 R2 servers. And some of the key benefits of that is it's going to give you that ability to pay monthly for those ESUs on your Azure bill, rather than paying an upfront annual license cost. And it's also going to give you the flexibility to, on that consumption basis, turn them off as you have the ability to modernize or deprecate those workloads. You just need to have software assurance or SPLA licensing or CSP licensing to be able to take advantage of it. But some of the additional benefits is if you go this route with enabling your ESUs through Arc, it would also draw down on any MAC agreements you have within Azure. And if you have any discounting within your Azure environment as well, those discounts would apply towards those ESUs. And then in the second session we had, Adam dove deeper into some of the additional capabilities that you unlock by Arc enabling your servers. So by onboarding your servers to Arc, you extend that Azure Resource Manager. Sorry, one second here. You extend the Azure Resource Manager control plane to those servers that are sitting outside of Azure, and then it allows you to take advantage of those Azure services that you're utilizing for your workloads natively today onto those servers outside. So what he went into in the second session was more the Azure Monitor capabilities and Azure Update Manager for patching of those Arc servers. So today what we're going to do is click a little further into some of the additional capabilities Arc has. So we're going to focus a little more on Defender for Cloud with Defender for Servers, and then Azure Auto Manage, which you can use to maintain configurations on your servers. So again, not to belabor the point, but again, what Azure Arc is allowing you to do is take advantage of those native Azure tools and experiences that you've used for your Azure VMs and your other Azure resources, bring those out to your servers sitting outside of Azure, and can you continue to use those same capabilities with the Azure portal for management, CLI, PowerShell, APIs, Azure policy, and so on. And with Azure Arc infrastructure, whether it's an Arc enabled server, or even if you have on-premises Kubernetes clusters, if you're using Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes, it essentially becomes a first-class citizen. Your infrastructure does, giving you that capability to organize your resources within subscriptions and resource groups, and right along with your other Azure services. And then utilize tagging strategies for reporting and resource management. 1 second here. All right. And then it gives you the ability to have that same identity and access management that Azure RBAC provides. And then you can, again, utilize that same monitoring capability with Azure Monitor, or governance with Azure Policy, and extend the Defender for Cloud, like we're going to dive into a little further. And again, this works on-prem in other clouds, whether it's physical servers, VMs, Windows or Linux OSs, Kubernetes clusters. You can onboard them individually or at scale, up to thousands of servers or clusters, and get all of that within that single control plane and framework within Azure. So without further ado, let's dive a little further into securing your hybrid workloads with Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So as I'm sure most of you are aware, my PowerPoint will, as I'm sure you all know, Microsoft Defender for Cloud is going to be our cloud native platform that's going to give you that comprehensive security across your, the full life cycle of your applications, for cloud-based apps, and now with Azure Arc, also your hybrid and multi-cloud workloads as well. So it's going to provide you that cloud security posture management and workload protections just at the start, really with that goal of helping you continually assess your security posture, secure and harden your resources, with recommendations, with built-in security benchmarks and compliance standards. And then it's also going to allow you to better defend your resources and services by detecting and resolving threats and providing prioritized alerts. Switch over here. So, and just to give you kind of a glimpse without going too far into the weeds with Defender for Cloud, you would have your overview, and then what we're really going to be able to drill into here is, whether it's a multi-cloud environment, or whether you are just running on-prem and in Azure. It's going to give you that centralized view of your current security posture. And again, you can pull in, if you are multi-cloud, you can pull in AWS or GCP resources as well through various connectors that we have. And then you can set your regulatory compliance standards, which we have a lot of built-in initiatives for that, or you could create your own. And then it gives you really that kind of central pane of glass, so to speak, for what your compliance is, no matter where your resources are running. And if we look at the inventory of servers, what we can see with Azure Arc is if you have servers, virtual machines that are running in Azure, you'll see that even Azure Arc servers, wherever they're running, it's going to see them as, again, that first-class citizen mentality where you're going to be able to have that same view, same visibility, same types of recommendations and assessments against those servers through Azure Arc.
Do it. Yeah.
And then we have with workload protection here, you can also build out various dashboards. We have a lot of built-in views that are going to give you visibility into what tooling you have deployed and making sure that you're compliant and you're utilizing Defender for Cloud to its fullest extent. And you can always roll your own dashboards, as Adam had showed a little bit in that session earlier this week. And then along with that is all of the security alerting that we have. So again, whether it's a Azure VM or an Arc-enabled server sitting on premises, it's going to be constantly evaluating those servers, sending security alerts. You can have those alerts go to distribution lists, to your SIM solution, or ServiceNow to create tickets so that they're actioned on. All of that can be enabled through Defender for Cloud. Okay. I think one of the main things we want to look at from there is Defender for servers. So this is going to be what's going to provide, going to give you that protection on your machines wherever they reside again. And it's going to provide you that threat detection and advanced defenses, whether it's Windows or Linux machines. It's going to have options for vulnerability assessments, just-in-time access, adaptive application controls, and a bunch of integrations to just make sure that you have those security guardrails in place for all of your workloads. And one of the other nice things about it is it's going to provide you with that consumption-based approach for Defender for servers and for MDE on top of that. So, if you say that you're paying for servers when they're running, when they're deployed, and you're not paying that subscription model or license model. So another benefit to Defender for servers is, again, that consumption-based billing within your Azure invoice.
So this is pretty cool, Mark. Like, it seems like, this adds an easy capability for onboarding with Defender. Like, because there's lots of different ways to onboard machines into Defender, right? But this one seems like it might be a little bit easier versus some of the disconnected scenarios that are out there.
Yeah, so we do still offer direct onboarding, as it's called, for certain plans within MDE. But yeah, where Defender for Cloud is going to make this really easy is to just automate the onboarding for any Arc-enabled server that lands within your subscription. So if we take a look here, if I pull up my individual subscription, you'll see that we'll have all of our Defender plans listed out here. And there we go. So as you can see here, it'll show that within this subscription, I had 37 resources, and that's inclusive of my Azure VMs and my Arc-enabled servers. So again, it's seeing those Arc-enabled servers as the same type of objects from a Defender for server standpoint as my, so on-prem and Arc, it's seeing them as the same type of object. So from here, it gives me that ability to automatically onboard every server resource within my subscription to Defender for servers.
Nice, and that Defender agent just goes on through the Arc agent. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So it would still just be that connected machine agent that we've kind of talked about in the previous sessions as well. And MDE is just going to be an extension that rides on top of that agent. So
wow, that's awesome.
It'll just be an additional extension that's deployed for the agent configuration itself. And that's what's going to enable the deployment of MDE and all of the policies that your security team would then manage on MDE from there.
Nice.
And one other thing to note is, so we have this concept of Plan 1 and Plan 2. So Plan 1 is just going to be the Defender for Endpoint primarily. It does give you some capabilities for vulnerability management and some other capabilities that you'd be aware of when if you're already using Defender for Endpoint. And then Plan 2 is going to have additional capabilities where it's going to allow, one of the main points of interest here is that file integrity management. So one of the requirements that P2 would then have is the ability to pull those logs in. So as of today, if you go with P2, with Plan 2, it would also then need to deploy the Azure Monitor Agent as an extension as well, so that it can start pulling in those specific logs to enable those capabilities of file integrity monitoring and some of these other additional features that P2 is going to allow you to take advantage of.
Oh, good. So this already moved over from the old log analytics agent deployment into the new Azure Monitor Agent deployment. Is that right?
With P2, it did, yes. Yep.
Nice.
You do still have the capability to, let's see here. You do still have the capability to configure your monitoring. So if you are using the log analytics agent or the MMA today, you can have that still be configured as your default for anything that is onboarded at Defender for Servers. But obviously, we're recommending to use the Azure Monitor Agent as the default here as well. And here's where you also would, yeah. That makes sense?
Yeah. Oh, this is awesome.
Okay. And then obviously with this capability, because it's running through Arc, there will be specific URLs that you would need to have whitelisted to enable the communication to Arc, as we've discussed in previous sessions. And then we do also have service tags. So if you have NVAs on-prem like a Palo Alto or FortiGate, you can take advantage of those service tags to make it a little easier to manage that whitelisting. And then I think the other option would be just to cover this is, obviously if you go this route, it's going to be onboarding all 37 servers that you have within this subscription to Defender for Servers. That may not always be the case. Maybe you don't want to have by default all servers onboarded. So if that were the scenario where you only wanted to target specific resources, maybe it's only the servers in your production. Not that we would recommend that, but if you were wanting to only target specific servers within the subscription, we do also have the ability to onboard a Defender for Servers via Azure Policy. So you could have a Azure Policy assignment that would only target the specific servers you want MDE enabled on.
So versus doing like the subscription-wide onboarding, right?
Correct. Yep. This would be subscription-wide. Azure Policy, you could get a little more fine-grained in that targeting.
Sure.
Right.
Cool.
Hopefully that all made sense. And then just a real quick note on Azure Sentinel. For those of you that aren't aware of it, it is our cloud-native SIEM solution, SIEM and source solution. And one of the other nice things about Azure Arc is it does have really easy integrations with Sentinel. So if you are Arc enabling your on-premises servers through those automated deployments and at-scale deployments with policy, we can also enable the Azure Monitor Agent to be automatically onboarding all those servers to be sending the critical logs to Sentinel and making sure that your SOC teams have full visibility and all the alerting capabilities that Sentinel is going to provide from there. Okay. Maybe let's switch directions a little bit. And so what we're going to talk about now is another service we have in Azure that we can adopt with Arc servers, and that would be auto manage. So we all have these capabilities with Azure to manage your servers, from monitoring with log analytics, Defender, like we've already discussed, patching with Update Manager, backups, guest configuration, all those services that you may already be using for your Azure native VMs today. And while it's great to have all those capabilities individually, what Azure Auto Manage is going to bring you is it's going to, is really created to simplify all of those management and operational tasks for your Azure and your hybrid environments, and really bring that all together under one product so that you can really simplify that management at scale. So Azure Auto Manage machine best practices can be used to automatically onboard and configure your machines to selected Azure services, which we've deemed to have the baseline best practices that you should be implementing for all of your servers. So with a few clicks, or a deployment template or a policy assignment, Auto Manage will take care of all of the onboarding that's necessary to bring those servers into Azure Monitor, to enable backups, to deploy Defender, and setting up of configurations, and then you can take it would take it to the next step as well, where then it's also monitoring for drift, and it will remediate if there are any unwanted changes to make sure that your servers are staying within compliance or within that desired state. And again, it supports Azure native VMs and Arc enabled servers with some caveats that we'll get into here. And it also it supports both Windows and Linux distributions. So again, the intent is really to simplify your operations for the entire life cycle of your machines. Try to show you that quickly here. Okay. So at the front of it, this is going to be Auto Manage machine best practices. And what you'll see here is where this really starts is with the configuration profiles. So we have a couple built-in ones, one for production, one for dev test, and then you can also create your own custom profiles. So if I go to create a new one here, just so you can see what features are enabled. So you'll see right from the start, what Auto Manage can enable is the automation of making sure your servers are being backed up. It's also going to have, you're going to be able to set kind of high level frequency for those backups, and basic configurations for it. It's going to help you with anti-malware, VM insights. You can automate the deployments and the dependency agent requirements to enable that full functionality. And then there are some baseline machine configurations, and like I had mentioned, update management, change tracking. All of those capabilities can just be easily implemented with one configuration where you're just onboarding it to an Auto Manage profile rather than having to manage all of these different services independently. And what you will notice here is with Arc specifically, just to call this out, there are some features of it that have some limitations. So today, Azure Backup isn't enabled on, you aren't able to onboard Azure Arc servers to Azure Backup through Auto Manage. You can use Azure Backup for servers that are sitting outside of Azure. That's just kind of an additional configuration that that's required for Arc servers or for any server that's not sitting within Azure. And then there are certain other limitations just depending on the OS and what configurations you're looking for here. One other note that I would call out here is, if we look at update management, like we had discussed on the previous session, since Azure Update Manager just went GA recently, Azure Auto Manage will eventually be updated to use the new version of Azure Update Manager, but there are still some settings here, like this would be enabling update management with the older automation account and log analytics workspace method that's been out there for a long time. And one other note here is, and we'll get a little further into machine configuration itself, which is another solution here on top of auto manage. But what you're going to see here is what this would do is deploy the baselines that we have. So the Azure security baselines, that we have multiple different policy initiatives for. This would automatically onboard the server to have all of those baseline policies audited against those servers. And now at this time, we do have the capability to use monitor and or apply and monitor and autocorrect as well. So the different capabilities that we'll get into a little bit later with PowerShell DSE and machine configuration, you can set those right from the start with auto manage today.
Oh, that's cool. So if I onboard a machine into auto manage, I could say, you know, I have a choice, right? Like I could say, this is my configuration and I want you to apply this as part of onboarding and then let me know if it drifts. Or you could say, you know what, I want anybody that makes a change to get auto corrected very quickly. And I could just do that as part of this onboarding, right?
Correct. Yep.
That is very flexible.
Yeah. So, and again, this is what it would look like once a server is onboarded. So it's going to be constantly evaluating it based on the policy that you're, the profile that you have assigned to it. It's going to show if it's conformant. If it's not, it's going to flag it. If you have, you know, those configurations just set to audit, you know, that may be a little bit different than the experience you're going to see if you have it to, for the machine configurations itself to have, you know, essentially auto remediation in place as well. But for any of those other services, you know, again, like with the log analytics agent being deployed, you know, so that AMA extension, if you're using Arc servers here, or if you're talking about Azure Backup, if somebody goes in and disables that functionality on this on an individual server, and it's already configured to a profile in auto manage, going to be consistently or continuously assessing those, and it would then re-enable Azure Backup if it sees a non-conformance there.
Neat.
Yeah. And I can just, this is another thing where you can individually onboard servers to specific profiles. So it would show you all the eligible servers that you can onboard. But additionally, this is another aspect where you would most likely want to enable these at scale with Azure policy. So you would have an Azure policy that would essentially look for any new servers within a scope. And the first thing it would do is enable Azure Auto Manage with a specific profile for those servers. And then Auto Manage would take care of all those other baseline best practice configurations for you.
Are those built-in policies we have available? I'm assuming we have built-in policies available to support this, right?
There are built-in policies. Right now, there's specifically built-in policies for Azure native VMs. There is a preview policy as well for enabling Azure Arc servers as well for Azure Auto Manage.
Nice.
If we just go out here, just to give you some visibility into what this would look like. Before a server that's onboarded to auto manage, one of the things you would see in addition to any of the configurations of extensions, so for the AMA agent, MDE, et cetera, all those things that we saw, you know, Windows Admin Center is another option there. You would also see these baseline configurations deployed under machine configuration. So you'll see we have this Azure Windows baseline, and this is going to be something that would be deployed by auto manage best practices. And as you can see here, this one's configured to audit. So you would see in those Azure baseline best practices initiatives, you know, we have 285 different policies that it's auditing against any server that's onboarded here. So obviously that's a high bar to have it compliant with all of those, but you can drill in here and see which ones are non-compliant, and where you would need to focus any remediation efforts or updated policy creation. Okay. Let's go back. That's Azure Auto Manage best practices, kind of in a nutshell. And one of the other things we would have on top of that is if you wanted to take that a step further, and while best practices are great, I think we know that every organization is going to have their own custom requirements, various other configurations that they're going to have as their gold standards for all of their servers. And that's where Azure Auto Manage machine configuration is going to come into play. So for quite some time within Azure, we've had the capability to, with Azure Policy, to do some of these activities. And it was known as Azure Guest Configuration Policy. And a while back, they did move this under the Auto Manage umbrella. So now it's called Azure Auto Manage Machine Configuration. And just like it sounds, this is going to allow you to take advantage of and use Azure Policy to reach within those operating systems on your servers, whether they're in Azure natively or with Azure Arc, to either audit or set configurations, to enable and disable features within the OS, and to enforce any security requirements that you have. So one thing we can look at here is there's a couple different methods for this. So there are built-in policies, and then you can also roll your own custom configuration. One second here. So if we look at Azure Policy under the guest configuration category, you'll see that there are a whole bunch of different built-in policies that the product group has already created here that are going to give you kind of some of those well-known, often used configurations for, within the guest for that you may want to take advantage of. So they continue to build these out, but some of the ones that were really top of mind for a lot of our customers were ones like this one to configure secure communication protocols just to make sure servers are using TLS 1.2. And then again, a bunch of other, this list is kind of growing on a weekly basis, almost to add additional options to it. So if we were to take this policy, really it's just a matter of creating an assignment. And if you are not used to using Azure Policy, all you're really going to do is define a scope for it. And once you create that definition or that assignment from that built-in definition, and you can see here where we can include Arc servers. It's one of the built-in parameters we have. And this one specifically, sorry, is for configuring a time zone. So let's just say we want all servers in our environment to use Central Time. We wanted to include all Arc servers in addition to native Azure VMs. And then what we can do is create a remediation task from here. That would use a system assigned managed identity to go run this with the appropriate permissions. And once this policy is evaluated, it would go through, and any server that it evaluates that does not have Central Time Zone created or configured within the guest OS, it would go and make that change through that Azure Auto Manage machine configuration. So that's where, if I look back at this server we were looking at before, you'll see that we already did have that policy assigned to it specifically, where if we click into it, you can see where it is showing that the time zone was compliant. I'll show you where those remediation tasks happen as well if you're not familiar with it in a little bit here.
Hey Mark, what if I'm really impatient and I don't want to wait for the policy engine to come through and evaluate stuff? Can I do something to just force a policy reevaluation?
You can, yeah. Yeah, we do have options that are documented for using Azure CLI or Azure policy or PowerShell to force policy evaluation, either at a subscription level, or you can go down to a resource group level as well, if that's where the assignment is scoped.
That would be useful.
Yeah, so definitely something to consider. Or yeah, otherwise, if you don't want to wait, hours for that assignment to take place and for those configurations to update, so you can just make sure that it worked appropriately, you can run those on-demand evaluation.
Does the guest configuration also run under the same engine? And these are all policy too, right?
Yeah, so what happens is the Azure policy is used as a assignment and scoping mechanism for the machine configurations. But then machine configuration itself is essentially a SaaS deployment of PowerShell DSC, which many customers are using today on premises. So you would utilize Azure policy to, at scale, assign machine configurations to servers or within a specific scope, or based on tags, or specific OS types, so however you want to manage that. And then once those machine configurations are applied to the server, then there is an evaluation that's done, every about 15 minutes to, just like what we talked about with auto-managed best practices, where it's going to be evaluating the compliance against those machine configurations periodically. And then depending on what you have configured as the setting, whether it's audit or like we had shown before with audit and monitor or audit and autocorrect. So every 15 minutes, if I had changed the time zone on this machine to East US or Eastern, and it was set to autocorrect here, every 15 minutes, it would go evaluate that, see its non-conformance, and adjust that configuration.
Oh, cool.
Okay. So if we take a look and try to go a step further with this now, I'm just trying to take a look at time here. Obviously, a lot of these built-in policies and machine configuration settings are great, but you may have the need to do a custom configuration, or if you already have thousands of GPOs that you're using, or if you're using SCCM, or if you're already using DSC on premises today, you may have that desire to move some of those configurations over to Azure Auto Managed Machine Configuration. So what we can do is create custom machine configuration policies from there. Let me pull up my server here. Okay. So essentially what we're going to end up doing, if we want to create a custom machine configuration, the first thing you'll need to do is make sure that you're creating these configurations or these custom configurations from a machine that's running the same OS platform. So if you want to have these configurations for newer versions of Windows, you would be creating these custom configurations from the same OS type. And from there, we're going to be doing a lot of this in PowerShell. So there are specific required modules that you'll need and module versions to make sure that it's compatible with everything you're doing. And then from there, what we'll end up doing is we want to create a storage account. So we'll scope it within a specific resource group and region. And see if I can get to cooperate here. Demo gods are going to make this a little challenging, but the first thing we're going to do is create a storage account to house these custom configurations. And this may take a little bit of time here, but hopefully not long. So once we have the storage account created, really all this is going to do is going to be a place where we can have the custom configuration file. If you're used to DSC, it's going to end up creating a package for your DSC deployment. And here we have our storage account. I'll be using this later. Let me just type this in here. So once we have that storage account created, you're going to see here that the next step is going to be to create the custom configuration. So this is just I'm trying to keep this simple and fairly basic here, just to make sure it, you can see the functionality work. But what this is going to do is we're just going to be making sure that we have PowerShell 7 installed. We're going to create a local user on the server. And it's also just making sure SMB1 is disabled here. So if we take this and this PowerShell ESC module will then create that local file. So this is just going to create that, essentially a MOF file. If you're familiar again with the ESC, it's going to create this file locally and have it available to push out to an Azure storage account once you package it up. So as you can see here now, it created that local MOF file based on the configuration you had in your script. And then the next step from there is going to be to create the package from it. So here, if we take that MOF file output, we'll run it through this guest configuration package module. And here we're going to create a zip file locally. So it's just a zip with all the required DSC packages within it. And now we just want to push that out to storage. Now you can test. One of the recommendations as you're going through this process would be to test those packages locally, just to make sure you're getting the desired result before you go to the next step of pushing it out to Azure and creating those packages from there. I'm going to skip that step for now. But so from here, we'll just take that package and we'll push it out to that Azure storage account.
I have faith in your packaging ability. I'm sure this one will work.
Well, that's the idea. Let me just pull up that storage account. So for cooperate. Bear with me 1 second here. Okay. So now we'll see out here that based on those steps, created our storage account. And within that, we have a we have a container. And there's our package file. So again, the biggest hurdle here is typically going to be validating all of these configurations locally, making sure you're getting the desired result. And then from there, again, we're just pushing that package out to Azure storage so it's accessible. Now, if I go back here, so the next step from there is going to be to create a Azure policy definition. So what we want to do is create this Azure policy definition to point to that specific package file that we're going to want to use to deploy to all of our servers. And then we're going to be able to assign that to a specific scope from there.
Cool. So you basically like built out a whole scenario where you're saying, hey, I want to have these custom things happen on this machine, and now I'm going to have a custom policy, like not a built-in policy, but a new policy that is specific to my custom configuration that I want to put together here.
Exactly. Yep. So here,
wow. Okay.
We'll see right here. Obviously this should all be visible within the portal as well. Obviously, this may take a little bit of time, but if we look at our policy definitions now, in theory, I filter this back down to guest configuration. I can spell it right. We should see a new definition out here. Okay, there it is. So if we click into this, you'll see that we created that definition. It's targeted to a specific blob storage account. And we have it, the ability to target that at our connected machines as well. And now we have this definition based on that package file. So all of the configurations themselves are within this package file. All of it's built in this definition now. So from there, it's just really a matter of assigning that policy. So the next step will be to create that assignment. And I had already defined a specific resource group that we were going to target that to. And that'll go ahead and create that assignment targeted to the scope of that specific resource group that I had already defined in there. Now this kind of goes back to what you had brought up before, Adam, where there's going to be some lag before it's going to trigger that that new assignment to run an evaluation. And if we would have to sit here for a good 15 or 20 minutes to see it actually go through the process of evaluating, seeing what's not compliant, triggering a remediation task, and then having DSC locally make those configurations. So, so if I bounce out here,
so this policy will get applied, and then the machine is the machine going to reach out to that blob account? Is that sort of like how that network flow works?
Yeah. So if the machine configuration is created and assigned to that virtual machine, the connected machine agent through Azure Arc and the capabilities that the guest configuration extension on that server is going to enable, that server would then go out, grab that package, unzip it locally, and then DSC is going to run its configuration and report back to Azure policy, whether it's compliant or not.
Wow, that's sick. That's really neat.
Yeah. So if we look here, if I pulled that up, now again, there's going to be that Microsoft minute, so to speak. Yeah, it's not going to show here even as a compliance entry yet because the evaluation hasn't occurred. But if I went and looked at a previous version of this that I had deployed, what you would see here is the evaluation's already run. Initially, there may have been some non-compliance. So if I go into the remediation here, we should be able to see that we had this previous iteration of it that did have a remediation task out here. Now we see that we have our new policy here and new assignment that it would run through that remediation on. And if we click into these remediation tasks, you'll see that the policy that I had deployed for that built-in time zone policy, that's already remediating here. So this one's in progress. Just kind of click into that one since it's here, and you see that it is targeting a specific server that was in the resource group, and that's an Arc server that was in the resource group I scoped it to. So that remediation is occurring from that built-in policy. And then you will eventually see, once that evaluation is complete, that new policy assignment we just made, you'll see remediation tests kick off for that. But if I go into the previous one that I had completed earlier, you'll see that it had found all of these different servers that were out of compliance, and it had performed that remediation against them to, again, kind of make it so. So if I switch back to one of these servers here, what you would end up seeing at the server level, if I go into machine configuration here, you'll see that this one had this specific configuration applied to it via policy. We had seen that a remediation task occurred on it. And you can see here that it has these three configurations. Once it pulls up, here's again back to what we had seen in VS Code, PowerShell version 7, Arc user. So all of these initially, at least this Arc user would not have been there. So through that remediation task, it would have created it through PowerShell or through PowerShell DSC locally. And once the evaluation occurred again, now you can see that it's compliant. And because we have that set to apply and autocorrect, that would be something where in this specific scenario, if any of those features were disabled or if that local ARC user was deleted, again, the machine configuration would detect that nonconformance and correct that drift over time.
Wow.
So that's kind of, again, very simple machine configuration or custom configuration there. I know a lot of customers have some very complex GPOs out there. They're already using DSC. It's way more complicated than that. But really anything you can accomplish from DSC, you should be able to utilize machine configuration to do those deployments. And the nice thing about this feature is that ability to have that work along with Azure policy so that you have that flexibility to assign different scopes for all of your different machine configurations for those assignments.
Wow, that's awesome and flexible. Yeah. That's neat. Multi-purpose.
And I know we're running a little on time here, but one other thing to note is we'd already kind of covered this, the different remediation options. But one other thing to note is we had definitely focused primarily on Windows in these sessions, for obvious reasons. But one of the things the product group for machine configuration for AutoManage is really looking to do is enable all of these features for Linux distributions as well. So definitely something to take a look at for all of your Linux workloads as well, just to see what capabilities it has. But definitely looking to have a strong DSC community for the tooling and development of this feature on Linux distros as well. And we also have a number of different built-in policies for Linux already, and a lot of community engagement for the tooling with this open source tooling called NX Tools that has been adopted for all the Linux distros. So again, another thing to keep in mind as you're looking at your entire footprint and your entire fleet of servers, whether they're inside or outside Azure. And that is about all I had for a demo from a demo perspective. So I'm not sure if there are any other questions out there, Adam.
There are not from the chat that I'm seeing. I think we can, when I hand this over to Kelly to wrap this last one up, and I want to thank everybody for joining our sessions here. This has been really fun. So.
Yeah, and I, again, appreciate everybody for sticking with us for these three. Again, reminder, we do have one more coming up on Tuesday. Adam and Mark will not be our headliners on that one. We've got some SQL folks coming to lead that. So it's going to be a deep dive on SQL. Don't miss it. It'll be great. And again, thank you to both Adam and Mark for leading us thus far for these three sessions. And from a next step perspective, as highlighted in the previous sessions, we do have an open offer out to you all. If you're interested in doing a POC around what you saw here in your own environment, wanting to have a deeper conversation, or let's say you're ready to go, we are here to help. There's a form that you can fill out to request follow-up engagement from our team, and we would look forward to working with you to see this or answer any questions on how to get this going in your environment. So again, thank you all for your attendance thus far. We'll post the recording here momentarily. You get a notification around that. And again, please don't forget to join us next Tuesday. And with that, I'm going to close out the recording. If you have any other questions, please post that in the Q&A and we will answer those as they come up. Thank you again.
Thanks all.